Okay, now let's move on to the last question, question 5, the assertion. I would say generally, a bit disappointing because some of you did not attempt the question at all. Some of you attempted with only 2 sources or 1 sources. Some of you attempted with 3 sources, then halfway, threw off. Like it's an incomplete sentence, it's a rush work. Okay, now I know that you have quite a bit of homework. If you have problems managing your time, please talk to me. Okay, I thought that giving you 1 week is sufficient, but if you're not coping, please talk to me and we can see how to manage your time. Because if I don't get you used to write out and articulate a certain amount of content or certain amount of thoughts, it will be harder for you to articulate it in assessments. Okay, so which is why I think it's important for you to get used to writing and articulating this amount of work. Okay, so if you're unable to complete them, please let me know early and then we can talk about how to manage your time. And as you know before from last year, term 3 is horrible. Okay, so if you don't get enough practice, you will not progress. So please talk to us if you can't manage if you have problems managing your time. Okay, now let's take a look at this question. Most of you have tried to explain the source, but you are thinking, how come I get L1, I don't get L2 or L3? Why do you give me L1 despite explaining? Okay, well, the main thing is about the question about treated unfairly. Most of you have not dealt with this idea of unfairness. Okay, now some of you said that, the source shows that. Now most of you who did this question, you interpret the source correctly, evidence speaking is so far okay. Some of you could be a bit more clear, but the explanation tends to look like a paraphrase of the evidence rather than dealing with the question. Okay, now remember I told you, every time you see the question statement, you need to break it down. Alright, why is something unfair? Now, if someone is stealing and I punish them, is it unfair? Okay, if the punishment is justified, is it unfair? Okay, so some of you brought up source A and source B. You said that, they are forced to dress up like Chinese, Han Chinese, they are forced to study Mandarin, they are forced to they're cut off from their family and all these things. Now, if all these have good reasons, okay, is it still unfair? Alright, if all this is done for every single citizen in China, is it still unfair? Okay, so because you all have not dealt with this aspect of why is this, and not explain why is this unfair, which is why it makes it difficult for you all to get the explanation level. Okay, so how could I explain this to be unfair? Okay, for example, for this case, alright, they are cut off from their language. Okay, they are forced to do this. So you can say that it's only done to the Uyghurs with no good reason. Okay, so it's only done to them and there's no good reasons. That's why it is unfair. Versus just saying that, they are forced to do this. As I said before, if they are forced to do it, but there are good reasons to justify it, it's not being unfair, isn't it? Okay, so you need to bring up this point. Okay, now this is especially evident in source E or source F. Okay, many of you some of you are able to do this, that it is because the Uyghurs are the ones who are being terrorists, they incited violence. Okay, that's why the government has to treat them that way. Has to treat them that way. So even though it's quite harsh, but you all feel that it's justified, that's why it is fair, because there is good reasons to do so. It's justified, that's why you all find that it is fair. Okay, so that's the thing, you have not shown the idea of unequalness or justification to show whether it is fair or not, which is why many of you, the explanation, I couldn't give you L2 or L3. Okay, so remember, when you look at the question, please unpack the statement. Please try to break down what it means, so that from there you will have ideas about what to put in an explanation to ensure that you explain towards the question. Okay, remember I told you, this is not a test of your English, this is not English comprehension. So we are not looking at paraphrasing, we are looking at how you can link it to the question. Okay, so please break down the question next time. Unfair, yeah, that's what I mentioned just now. Ideas of unjustified, ideas of unequal treatment. Okay, next thing, some of you like to write source A agree, or source D disagree. hello, can you please read the question? Explain how far you would agree. So if you write like this, you are not answering the question. By right, I should give you a 0. Okay, so please write things like I would agree because A supports the statement or whatever. Okay, some of you, the whole question, nothing about I. The question asks you how far would you? You never talk about yourself. You are not answering the question. Okay, so please take note. All right. Now I know the answer key did not show, explicitly that oh, I must talk about the unfair. I must talk about the whether is it justified or not to explain the unfairness. Well, you must understand when the paper was set, it was thought they decided to give more chance to the Sec 4s last year because they took this in the afternoon like what happened to you in 4N last year, and they just came back from circuit breaker, so they were being a bit more kind to them. Okay, but as a practice, I thought I should impart all these nuances for you to get used to it, such that your explanation is clearer. Okay, now if you're not so sure, I think a good example of a good explanation, you can look at my Sarah's, and I think Vanessa's 1 or 2 paragraphs was okay, but mostly quite brief, so it wasn't very clear. I think it was also Patricia also, and Ao Yong. Okay, just take a look and maybe you learn from each other as well what can be done. All right.